This is what Alex Riley did. He wants to dive over the
Oh my gosh!
These wrestler careers sank and never recovered after WWE. Number 1. Velveteen Dream. Now, the Velveteen Dream was the hottest thing in WWE 8 years ago. Patrick Clark's Prince-inspired gimmick was an instant hit, and he represented what WWE fans loved, a larger-than-life character. It also helped that Dream was pretty damn good in the ring as well. Dream had WrestleMania main eventer written all over him until April 2020, when the then NXT star was accused of sending explicit images to underage boys on Instagram. Now, Clark outright denied these claims, and Triple H himself stated that he investigated the claims and didn't find anything at all. However, the details behind the investigation are sketchy, as one of the accusers stated that WWE never contacted him for their review. But even though Clark's run in NXT was never the same because of the accusations damaged his image, the last few months with Clark was considered awkward, and Triple H had to pull the former NXT North American champion from television due to the mountains of complaints that he got for using the NXT star. Dream was pulled from television in December 2020, and he sat on the sidelines until the company decided to release him on May 20th, 2021. Now, on the surface, it seemed like Clark was released because of the accusations, but according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dream's attitude was the huge reason that he was released from NXT. Reportedly, Clark rubbed the top officials the wrong way, and there was one unknown incident that was the final nail in his WWE career coffin. But the accusations didn't just ruin his WWE image. Dream couldn't get another wrestling gig for 4 years. The former NXT star's life spiraled out of control to the point where he was being arrested for first-degree battery and possessing drug paraphernalia. Though Clark was never charged with any crimes, no promotion thought that he was worth the trouble. In fact, there was some speculation that Triple H may have been interested in the NXT star now that Vince McMahon is gone, but Fightful claimed in 2022 that Dream was a public relations nightmare, and they had zero interest in bringing him back. Despite a recent crash out where Clark chastised the fans ruining his WWE career, he's back on the independent scene and he has made headlines for some of his controversial antics. But the Velveteen Dream will never reach the heights that he did in his early NXT days. Now, this is professional wrestling, so it's always possible that Triple H may change his tune and bring back the former NXT star. But that's unlikely to happen unless Dream becomes such a huge draw on the independent scene that WWE just couldn't ignore him. Number 2. Muhammad Hassan. The WWE loves the foreign heel gimmick, specifically ones that hated America. But out of all the anti-American foreigners, Muhammad Hassan was the most controversial. He sparked instant heat when he made his WWE debut in 2004 on Raw, when he trashed the troops and the US. But that was nothing compared to what happened on the July 7th, 2005 edition of SmackDown. That's the night when the infamous segment happened, as following Daivari's match against The Undertaker, Hassan began to pray on the ramp and 5 masked men appeared. They were armed with clubs and piano wire, and they beat and choked The Undertaker until he passed out. Now, on the surface, the attack seemed like a standard beatdown that you've seen on WWE before. Unfortunately, the timing was awful, as the London bombings happened on the same day it was aired, July 7th, 2005. 3 terrorists detonated 3 homemade bombs aboard the underground trains in inner-city London. Another terrorist detonated another bomb on a double-decker bus in Tavistock Square. And tragically, 52 people died and nearly 800 were severely injured. Now, this is a case of coincidence, as the Hassan attack was taped on July 4th, but since it aired on July 7th, it was too similar to the London bombing, and WWE drew instant heat from the segment. Hassan wasn't pulled immediately, but UPN, WWE's home channel at the time, demanded the character stay off their network permanently. The Undertaker and Hassan had a match at the Great American Bash, and Taker killed off Hassan's character thanks to a last ride through an open stage ramp. That was the last time Hassan was on WWE television. The company sent him back to developmental to alter their gimmicks, but shortly after, he was released on September 21st, 2005. Hassan retired shortly after his release, and it was rumored that he was in line for a huge push, one that would have resulted in him beating Batista for the World Heavyweight title at SummerSlam. But Hassan's WWE career was killed due to a badly timed segment. The former WWE star explained why he chose to hang up his boots for good, citing that he just couldn't do it anymore because he was heartbroken and depressed over the sudden release. Hassan mentioned during an interview with Chris Van Vliet that he didn't get over it until 10 years after his release. I didn't get over wrestling until probably 10 years later. I probably didn't go over wrestling until I got back in the ring a few years ago. And I remember people asking me questions about why I did that. They thought it was some planned thing, like I was gonna go back to WWE. No, I think I was 38. I needed to see if I could still do it. And I did it, and it was actually fun. I had a blast, and then I'm never gonna do this again. I just needed to do it. And that's when I started to get over wrestling, and that's when I think I started to mend. It was a huge loss. It was a huge heartbreak. and I think it took me a long time. Then I started a couple of years ago to do a few interviews here and there, and I really hadn't done much since. I guess I started to stop avoiding it because of how it made me feel. The thought of failure and everything that had happened from the character. I was always proud of it, but now I don't feel that when I talk about or think about wrestling. Hassan is now a teacher, and now despite his WWE career ending abruptly, he's still one of the most talked about characters in pro wrestling. Hassan genuinely seems like a nice guy, but it just shows you how controversial the anti-American gimmick can be. It can end careers. Number 3. Ahmed Johnson. Ahmed Johnson made history as the first African-American to win the Intercontinental Championship. He was also a core member of one of WWE's most notable groups, the Nation of Domination. Johnson seemed primed for the main event someday, but unfortunately that never happened. Not many people considered Johnson to be sloppy and reckless in the ring, and it was true for the most part, but Johnson wasn't that particularly of a bad wrestler. He certainly wasn't at the level of the Great Khali or Giant Gonzalez, but the biggest problem for him was that he was injury prone. Every time he was put into a big angle, the football-turned wrestler suffered some kind of injury. Add that in with his poor attitude backstage, Johnson's push as a top star subdued. But he was still a featured attraction until he left in 1998. According to Johnson during his interview with Sportskeeda, some personal and professional issues forced him to leave the company. My sister got sick with cancer and I went to go see her. She wasn't doing too well. All that was on my mind, along with a bunch of other stuff that was on my mind. So I decided if Vince wouldn't give me time off, it was time for me just to walk. Johnson came back a year later, but in WCW, and boy, it was a terrible run. Johnson came in as Big T and formed the Harlem Heat 2000 team with Stevie Ray. His introduction started off lackluster as Big T feuded with Booker T over the rights to keep the T in their names. Johnson won the feud, but his run with Stevie Ray is not fondly remembered. The matches weren't particularly good, nor were his promos. It felt as if he regressed from his WWE days. Johnson was also having trouble with his weight, and WCW wasn't too pleased with the man that was once coined as a future headliner. WCW fired him in mid-2000, and he was never able to recapture the magic he had in the mid-90s. But Johnson created enemies during his time in WWE as well. You may notice that he was never invited back to any reunion or anniversary show. He wasn't a well-liked star backstage and helped kill his career quicker than most. Number 4. Braden Walker. America's Most Wanted is one of the greatest tag teams in pro wrestling. Both James Storm and Chris Harris were a charismatic duo who could go in the ring, but Chris Harris's run as a single star never materialized in TNA, so we thought he'd have a better opportunity in WWE in 2008, and the Wildcat went on to have one of the most forgettable runs in company history. WWE completely stripped him of his identity. Everything that made Chris Harris entertaining and charismatic in TNA was gone in WWE. Walker made his debut on ECW, and there was clearly no plan for him out of the gate. He had the most generic and bland presentation possible, and you could easily see the misery on his face when he walked out. The former TNA World Tag Team Champion didn't even last in the company for a year, and his career was never able to recover after such a terrible run. The former WWE star described his experience with Chris Van Vliet, and he detailed his struggles during his WWE run.
It was close to a year, just from the get-go. Yeah, I just saw different things. Like when I first went, it was, people were excited to see me, and they didn't want news getting out. They made it feel like it was a big deal, that and we got all these plans for you and things like that. So it made me feel like, okay, maybe I made the right decision. But yes, within weeks, I was beginning to see that there was no background to any of this. There was no thought process, and I was just going to be another one of the ones that are just thrown out there. And I was thrown out. There was no story behind it, no background on Braden Walker or anything like that. And I had generic name, music, gear. There was no reason for people to really get behind me. I still felt like I could have made something work had they just let me go out and wrestle. But they were even taking that away from me. I mean, not like seconds and minutes before I would go out, I would have a producer trying to change my match, and you can't do this, you can't do that. So why don't you do that? And I'm like, you're messing with me, man. I couldn't even go out and be myself in the ring. It's very unfortunate, man. I felt like I could have made something work, but just didn't feel like the opportunity was presented to me.
Number 5. Brad Maddox. But Brad Maddox is another strange what if. When he made his main roster debut in 2012, Maddox seemed to be poised for something big once it was revealed that he was in cahoots with CM Punk. Now, Maddox was never positioned as the next John Cena or Roman Reigns, but he seemed well adjusted as an evil authority figure. But once he was outed from the general manager role in 2015, that's where his career ended. Maddox quickly went from punching bag to dark match wrestler in a matter of 2 months. This was a time where the former Raw superstar tried out a pair of different gimmicks, but unfortunately for Maddox, one of those gimmicks got him fired. Maddox was a little overzealous before one of his dark matches, and he reportedly badmouthed the fans and called them cocky pricks, which was a banned term in WWE. This upset WWE officials and Vince McMahon so much that they decided to release him immediately. But why was the term banned? Now you have to imagine this was WWE during their PG era, so this phrase was deemed inappropriate by top officials. Now it's not clear why WWE felt they needed to fire Maddox when they could have simply given him a fine or suspension. Maddox was being a heel at the end of the day, but apparently this was grounds for firing in WWE's eyes. Maddox went on to the independent scene for about a year and stopped wrestling altogether. He said in 2021 that he wanted to focus on his acting, and the former WWE star has completely gone off the grid as Maddox doesn't even have any social media. It's not clear why he wiped out all of his social media, though there were reports that Maddox was making weird videos before he disappeared. Whatever the case may be, Brad Maddox is a case where a performer was being a classic heel in the wrong era. Number 6. Perry Saturn. Now, while many may look back at his time in ECW and WCW as the best runs of his careers, most fans remember the former WWE star because of his silly WWE gimmick that surprisingly got over with fans. Saturn was a pretty good wrestler in the ring who had his best singles run in WCW. However, during the peak of his career, he decided to jump ship and join Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko as the Radicals. This group feuded with DX and Cactus Jack, and unfortunately for Saturn, he was overshadowed by both Guerrero and Benoit. He would at least go on to win the European and Hardcore Championship, but those runs didn't help establish him in WWE. But then in May of 2001, Saturn killed his own career. This was due to a match against a jobber named Mike Bell, and during the match, Bell accidentally botched an arm drag, and you could instantly see Saturn snap and beat the hell out of him. Saturn then dropped Bell right on his head to the outside. The former European champion took liberties to punish Bell for his harmless mistake, so WWE in turn punished Saturn by giving him the moppy gimmick. This silly gimmick got over with WWE fans, but it cemented him as a lower card act. WWE did eventually drop the gimmick, but Saturn didn't do much once his feud with Raven ended in 2001. He had a couple of tag team matches and was sidelined with an ACL injury. WWE eventually released him in November of 2002, and he briefly competed in TNA and fought around the indies, but his career peaked in WCW, even though most fans remember him because of the moppy gimmick. Sadly, Saturn's life had taken a turn for the worse. Whilst he made a number of appearances in different promotions on the indie scene, including World Wrestling All-Stars and New Japan Pro Wrestling, he would be homeless for years due to drug addiction. This happened after an altercation in April of 2004, where he came to the aid of a woman they were in the process of raping behind a strip club. After being shot, he became addicted to methamphetamine and was homeless for 2.5 years. Number 7. Rikishi. WWE had plans for Rikishi to be their next top heel in 2000 when he confessed to attempted murder, where he ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin at the 1999 Survivor Series. But Rikishi just didn't fit the heel role. The former WWE star didn't have the charisma to pull off his serious heel act, and fans just didn't buy Rikishi as this cold-hearted killer who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin. After that mistake, WWE abandoned heel Rikishi after he was sidelined with an ear injury, but the Hall of Famer remained on the mid-card vortex until his departure in 2004. Rikishi made the jump over to TNA in 2007, but his run didn't even last a month as he left the promotion due to a pay dispute between both sides. He would continue to wrestle here and there on the indies, but Rikishi never got out of that mid-card vortex because of his gimmick. His Too Cool gimmick was a fun one that excited fans, but it hampered him from becoming a top star. Some wrestlers just don't have the tools to be a main eventer. WWE tried to give Rikishi a shot at the top, but he fumbled his heel turn hard. Number 8. Chris Masters. Chris Masters is the epitome of what Vince McMahon loved in WWE, big sweaty men. During his first run, WWE used Masters' physique to get him over, and the Masterlock Challenge was a fun concept, but Chris Masters was no different than any other big strong man who used his strength to get over. His real test was against Shawn Michaels, who was fresh out of his feud against Hulk Hogan. Masters held up well. Granted, he didn't do anything to wow the fans, but he also didn't embarrass himself either. Masters would actually spend 2005 to 2006 in the upper card, and he challenged for the WWE Championship on several occasions. But when Chris violated the wellness policy, Vince McMahon was not happy about it. His status in the WWE dropped significantly as the company no longer saw him as a top heel. However, his fate was sealed when he failed a wellness policy the second time. WWE then opted to release him instead of waiting for the suspension to carry out. Even before the suspension, Masters mainly spent time in lower card feuds, with the biggest highlight being his pursuit for the Intercontinental Championship. And Masters made a return in 2009 and resumed his Masterpiece Challenge, and surprisingly he turned face a short time later after the crowd responded positively to his pecs dancing to the beat of Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. But Chris Masters never reached the heights of his first run as he was back occupying the mid-card scene. It certainly didn't help that he was suspended again for another wellness violation in 2010 and eventually released in 2011. Chris Masters still wrestles to this very day. He's notably competed in TNA and NWA with the hopes that he can return to WWE someday to show how much of a better performer he's become since his last WWE stint.
I don't think I'm ever going to be a full-time part of the company again. I think it would be a cool, Rumble surprise, for instance. There's definitely some amends. If I go back there, it's not just about myself, the oh shit moment, redemption, but it's making amends. It'd be cool to go back there and just kind of show the WWE universe who I am now, which is a very different performer.
Hopefully Masters gets that opportunity to prove how far he's come since his early days in WWE. Number 9. Abraham Washington. Now, Abraham Washington was fired for the very same reason as Brad Maddox, except what he said was on live television. Abraham Washington was only used as a manager on the main roster, and he had a generic WWE talk show during his entire run in ECW. He was then paired with Epico and Primo and then turned on his original clients for Darren Young and Titus O'Neil. But then Abraham went off script and delivered an off-color joke that got him fired. During a live broadcast, Washington said Titus O'Neil is like Kobe Bryant at a hotel in Colorado. He's unstoppable. Unfortunately, that joke was a reference to Kobe Bryant's sexual assault case, and it did not go over well with WWE officials. Vince fired Washington less than 24 hours later. But Washington wasted no time on ripping the company over the decision and tied his firing to Linda McMahon's run for Senate in Connecticut. Many felt that WWE overreacted to the situation, but the company stood 10 toes down with the decision and Abraham Washington disappeared from the limelight from his firing. Washington made a wrestling return in 2016, but his wrestling appearances were sporadic. The former WWE star talked to Wrestling Inc. and expressed his regret over what he said, and he's at peace with the decision that the company made. Honestly, at the time I was hurt and shocked that I was released, so I said things that were unfortunate and I regret saying those things. I've since apologized to WWE and I put it all behind me with a clean slate. And number 10, Vladimir Koslov. Vladimir Koslov was a generic big guy number 1237 that Vince McMahon wanted to push into the main event scene very quickly. He made his debut on April 4th, 2008 and main evented Survivor Series 2008 in a triple threat match against Jeff Hardy and Triple H. However, it was that main event that quickly exposed Koslov as a very green performer. WWE pulled a controversial stunt by putting up an article of Jeff Hardy being found unconscious in a hotel stairway, and that left Triple H and Koslov to fight alone in the main event, and it simply was not good. He relied on a basic moveset where heels use a ton of rest holds on the babyface, and it resulted in an extremely boring match. Now, he would go on to have matches against Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, and they turned out pretty well. However, the damage was already done, and the company moved him over to the ECW brand during the 2009 draft. Despite another big man flopping as a top star, Koslov found his success teaming with Santino Marella. The unlikely pair made for a very fun duo who had several memorable moments, including a tea party with Sheamus. Although Koslov had a notable run before his release in 2011, it was in the case of Vince choosing to push a big man only because of his size, and nothing else. Koslov didn't spend much time in wrestling afterwards, with the most notable thing he's done was announcing in Impact Wrestling in 2021. However, the former WWE star has made some appearances in big Hollywood movies such as John Wick 2, The Fate and the Furious, and Wolf Warriors 2. His wrestling days are certainly over, but the former WWE star has done a great job of carving out a nice acting resume. But there you have it, folks, 10 wrestlers whose careers that sank and never recovered after WWE. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.